So thank you all. Most of you, many of you are here because of the jail report, and that was a huge amount of work. So I really appreciate that you're coming and that we'll have that presentation tonight. Looks like we have a class in the back. Are you all student nurses? No. No. Ah, very good. Okay. Well, you can follow the agenda online, but here we are. The first thing is public comment. So we have 2 minutes per speaker. Anyone wishing to make a public comment tonight, just step up to the microphone and state your name and address. On any topic, doesn't have to be on the agenda tonight.
Good evening, everybody. Hear me okay?
Perfect.
My name is Doug Stokes. I live in Rolling Stone. We'll go with that. I'm here to talk about the jail proposal you guys are going to get tonight. A little bit about myself. I currently am a sergeant with the Winona County Sheriff's Department in jail. I've been employed with the county since 2002. Came out here to school in 1999. So as of fall of this year, I'll be a 20-year resident. So needless to say, I'm kind of invested in Winona County. I had this big grand speech worked out in my head, but it's gone. All I just want to say is you're going to get several proposals tonight, different options. And on behalf of myself and the 24 other employees that I work with, we hope that you pick option 4. Option 4 is going to be the best bang for the buck for the county. Not just looking at what will happen in 10 years, but in 30, 40, 50 years, which will be what the life expectancy will be of the next facility that we build. So with that, we hope you pick option 4. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for your service. I know there's also a lot of people here representing emergency services, and you were quite busy this weekend, so that was really above and beyond what you were working on this weekend, so thank you. Okay. For the second time, anyone wishing to speak before the board on any issue?
I'm Ben Klinger. I'm the Emergency Management Coordinator. Good evening. I just want to talk to you a little bit about this weekend and about the snowstorm and kind of what we did and what other people did, and make sure I thank some people who helped us out. So about 11:30 Sunday morning, I talked to Sheriff Ganrud, and that's when we found out that I-90 was going to be closed and stuff, so we decided to open up our Emergency Operations Center to start making plans for stuff we would need to do. We also decided at that time to put out a public alert advising no travel, so we used our integrated public alert warning system and put that alert out, hoping to get the word out. We also contacted the media and used social media to get the word out. And then kind of as the day progressed, about 4 o'clock, I was contacted by the Lewiston ambulance director, who said he was contacted by St. Rose of Lima Catholic Church, and he said they had 30 stranded travelers there, and they were looking to open a shelter. So made contact with the Red Cross. They have supplies in Lewiston for a shelter, so we're able to get them those. And then the Red Cross was going to pay for food and stuff from Quick Trip, but Quick Trip ended up donating that. So that was really nice. That way, they ended up with over 70 people in that shelter, people that were rescued off I-90 or were able to drive in off I-90 or 14, but weren't able to go any farther. So we provided them support with getting the Red Cross and all that stuff involved. And then we started hearing reports of people being in St. Charles, being stranded in St. Charles. So our original thought, we were going to call the church in St. Charles, because we have an agreement with the Catholic Church, but people were stranded out there. So we didn't think that was the best option to try to get people out to the church. So I worked with the ambulance director, and we opened the fire department up, and they ended up with about 30 people there. Quick Trip donated food for them as well, that the Red Cross was willing to pay for, but Quick Trip just stepped up and donated it. So the shelters are open till about 10 a.m. on Monday morning, and then the roads are opened up enough so that people could get where they needed to go. Monday morning, we decided again to put out a no travel advisory because the roads were still really treacherous. So we did that and social media that way. Through the night, we had deputies on patrol. We used our snowmobile. The DNR contacted me and they had worked with snowmobile clubs, both Lewiston, Winona, and the Whitewater snowmobile clubs to get their groomers. And so they took their tracked groomers out, and they performed several rescues of stranded motorists, plowed a ways so our deputies could get places they needed to go. So that was a really nice resource from the community that they offered to us. So we communicated with them when we got reports of where people were at, and they went and got them and took them to shelters for us. So our deputies were really hard at work with that. Our dispatchers taking all those calls. I thought it went really well. I've had several questions why we didn't declare a state of emergency. In the emergency management world, you declare a state of emergency if your resources are overrun or if you think your resources are going to be overrun. So then you can get state resources like the National Guard. I didn't feel our resources were going to be overrun with all the stuff we had going on. I did contact the state just to make sure they were aware, and I was also informed by them that we could ask for the National Guard, but all we'd probably get was the Armory because they had deployed most of their resources anyway. But we were handling it with local resources, so we didn't need to make that declaration that way. So, but I just want to make sure that everybody gets thanked, especially the snowmobile clubs, the church in Lewiston. When I stopped there Monday morning to check on them, there was so much food and stuff everywhere from people in town bringing in for stuff. It was really nice to see the community come together and do all that, and made it really easy to coordinate with people just stepping up to do stuff. So getting back to normal, getting everything going again. I think the roads are getting open. I talked with County Highway quite a bit too, just so we could relay information on what they were seeing and out that way. So all in all, I thought it went very well.
Okay. Commissioner Ward.
Ben, thank you. Tremendous effort, and it's great that we have a full-time emergency manager in these situations. Can you provide us a list so that the board could sign letters of thank you to these different organizations?
Sure can. As soon as I get it all compiled, I'm still working on it, but yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, I absolutely will pass that along.
Yeah, but I think we should probably all sign something and tell everybody that we greatly appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, we had neighbors out helping neighbors. We had farmers plowing ways for at one point for ambulance to get through and stuff. So,
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
And all this coordination doesn't just happen. That's pre-planning, so
Yeah.
thank you very much. Okay, for the third and final time, is anyone wishing to speak to the board about any topic? Just step to the podium, state your name and address, and you have 2 minutes. Okay, let's go on with the meeting. Public comment is closed. I'll have approval of the county board minutes, the closed session on February 12th.
So moved.
Okay.
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor of approving the county board minutes for the closed session of February 12th, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? Thank you. And approval of the county board minutes for the county board meeting of February 12th.
I'll move for approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Myers, seconded by Commissioner Olson, to approve the county board minutes of February 12th. Commissioner Ward.
I did attend, but I did arrive late, and I know my name isn't listed at the beginning, but I didn't see that it was listed anywhere. So somewhere, I came in when we were talking, what were we talking about? The consent business had been approved and everything, but I just would like it noted that I was late because of, I think, weather.
It was weather, it was weather, yes.
Yeah, but I did attend, so if
Yes,
somewhere I
thank you
could.
for finding that. And you're right, it was after consent business, but that's good. Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
thank you for pointing that out. Okay, so with the addition of writing in that Commissioner Ward attended,
I'm sorry, now I do see it. Page 3, it does say
Oh,
Commissioner
okay.
Ward joined. I apologize, I didn't get that far on the, I'm sorry, so it's taken care of.
okay,
Stand corrected.
all righty. Yes, okay.
Page 3,
Commissioner
middle.
Ward joined
Yeah.
the meeting, and she did.
Okay.
So we have a motion to approve the county board minutes February 12th. Motion by Commissioner Meyer and seconded by Commissioner Olson. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? Okay, minutes are approved. Consent comments.
I would like to pull 5.1 just for a separate vote.
Okay.
And then I have two requests for future board action and one announcement, please.
Okay, Commissioner Meyer.
I have one request for future board action, that's it.
And I have some announcements.
A couple of requests for future board items and a couple of comments.
Okay, Attorney Sonneman? Okay. So 4 commissioners have remarks and requests. Okay, approval of agenda. Can I have a second, please?
Whole second?
Okay, this is with the amendment for 5.1. Okay, so we have a motion to approve the agenda, changing item 5.1 for a separate vote. Motion made by Commissioner Olson, seconded by Commissioner Meyer. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, so the agenda is approved. Mr. Fritz, can you read the consent business, please?
Yes. Consent business 5.1 has been pulled. 5.2 is approved resolution in support of second Amtrak train. 5.3 is approved monthly resolution. 5.4, approved renewal of purchase of service agreement with Winona ORC Industries, Inc. for center-based employment, community-based welfare to work and follow-up services. 5.5 is award bid for County Road 120 Bridge 85580 construction to Icon Constructors, it says. 5.6, approve solid waste hauler and facility licenses application for 2019. 5.7 is confirm payment of disbursements.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve? Does anyone have a second for our consent business?
Sure, I'll second it.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion to accept the consent business as read. Motion by Commissioner Olson, seconded by Commissioner Meyer. All those in favor of that approval signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, so the consent business is accepted. All right, general business. I think this is where we would put in item 5.1. Becomes item 6.0. Okay, item 5.1, approve agreement to participate in Southeastern Libraries Cooperating. That's on page 15 of the agenda packet.
And I did ask to pull this. I want a separate vote. I did not support this in our budgeting process. We are above the state minimum for libraries. Not that I'm against libraries, but we have a lot of demands on our local property taxpayers, and I strongly felt that everybody should tighten the belt a little bit, but we're above what the minimum contribution is. So I didn't support it then, and I still don't support it, so I want a separate vote.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, the recommendation is to approve the agreement to participate in the Southeastern Libraries Cooperating as discussed with the background and the funding.
Do you need a motion?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so I would move to approve the funding.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the agreement for the Southeastern Libraries Cooperating. Motion by Commissioner Meyer, seconded by Commissioner Olson. All those in favor of that approval signify by saying aye. Aye. Oppose?
Aye or nay?
Okay, motion passes 4-1. Okay, now we're at committee recommendations. The presentation of the jail needs assessment report, and that starts on page 42 of the agenda. Commissioner Ward.
Just a question. The gentleman stepped to the podium and asked us to accept a recommendation. We're not making any acceptance or any, this is just, we're receiving the report?
Yes.
Because we have a working session scheduled for, March 19th and such. So we're really not discussing anything tonight, unlike what the gentleman requested of us. And quite frankly, there's a lot of information here I'm not ready to discuss yet.
No,
there
that's
was a
the
lot.
purpose of tonight, is to be presented so we can read it again and before the 19th, and then come together and have a full discussion with questions. And as many of the authors and members of the committee, I think, as possible to attend on the 19th also, so that we can have an open discussion. Commissioner Jacob.
I'd say I definitely agree with you, Commissioner Ward, but it was completely appropriate for the gentleman to come to the podium and state his opinion. I mean, that's what it was for. So.
Yeah, we ask it if it's on the agenda or not to come. So thank you for clarifying that. Okay, so we do have the report. Who's going to be our spokesperson or leader or?
Chair.
The committee chair, the hardworking committee chair. Yes.
Since the fact not in evidence. Well, last winter, the board established a jail advisory committee and charged it with studying the local criminal justice system and focusing especially on the jail. For years, the State Department of Corrections has told the county that the jail doesn't meet minimum standards, that it's a threat to the security of the county as well as to the safety of inmates and jail staff. In 2007, a committee was appointed by Sheriff Dave Brandt. It reached the same conclusion. The grand jury report in 2016 reached the same conclusion. Finally, the Department of Corrections forced the issue, as you know, in September of last year, when it announced that the jail would close no later than September 30, 2021. About 14 months ago, the board appointed 24 people to the Jail Advisory Committee. Over the next 14 months, there were some changes in membership as people lived their lives and went in other places and found other things to do. But a number of members of the committee are here tonight. I'd like to ask them to stand so that you can see who actually did this report. Thank you.
Hats off to you all. Thank you.
To help the committee accomplish the goals that the board set for it, the board retained Mr. Thomas Weber as a consultant to facilitate the work of the committee. I think Tom's work was crucial to the success of the committee. He kept us on track at meetings, and he organized the subcommittee system to ensure that work continued between meetings. He worked with Sergeant Glithero of the Sheriff's Office to find and analyze data on the jail and on the operation of the criminal justice system. For the last 2 or 3 months, the committee also benefited from the experience and the expertise of Bruce Schwartzman of BKV Architects. As the committee approached the analysis of the 4 options that the board asked us to study, Bruce's work was critically important. Without his support, the report that the committee submitted would have much less value. The final report, which the board received 2 weeks ago, was written by a team. Tom Weber, Karen Sonneman, Ken Fritz, and I took turns writing and rewriting the sections of the report. Then we'd get an email from Bruce and we'd have to rewrite it again. But his contributions to the process were really very important. As we took up the work in the beginning, the committee focused on a very simple goal. We wanted to recommend a way forward in the criminal justice system, and particularly the jail, that accomplished several objectives. 1, that it protected the community. 2, that it treated inmates fairly and focused on strategies that would avoid those inmates returning for yet another stay in the jail. That provided the jail staff with a safe and secure place in which to work, and that makes the best use of taxpayer funds. We think we've accomplished these goals. Along the way, we also noted that there were a couple of other challenges in the system that don't really fall within the purview of the challenge that the board gave us. But there are problems in the criminal justice system that provide opportunities for us to do 2 things. Number 1, to improve the system, and number 2, to save taxpayer money. There are the treatment of juveniles who are incarcerated, and the treatment of inmates who have significant mental illness. The report suggests to the board might want to take a look at these, and whether the board does so independently of the discussion of the report or whether it chooses to combine it, that would certainly be up to the board. In the end, because of the commitment of the committee members and the extraordinary amount of help that we received from Tom and from Bruce, the committee completed the task that it assigned to it. We present the report to the board tonight, and we look forward to that meeting on March 19th to answer the board's questions and explain the reasons for our recommendations. As you know, the report is almost 100 pages in length, and it has an equally sized appendix, so it's a lot of reading. To help the board as it studies the report, Tom has prepared a guide to the report that he will put on the wall here. And maybe if we show you how it's structured, that as you go through it, you won't get lost in the pages and you won't get lost in the language, but you can cut through all of that, see what it is that the committee believes ought to happen in our criminal justice system and the reasons why. Tom?
Thank you, and thank you, County Board Commissioners, for the support and for the effort that it's going to take of all of you to get through that report. It is a big one. We understand that there's a lot of material there. As we were trying to figure out how are we going to present this to the board and get the information that you need to be informed decision makers, we spent a lot of time trying to organize a report. I'm just going to summarize that in the event that you haven't been into the report yet. I don't know exactly when you received it or how much you've been able to get through yet, but there is a lot of material there. Commissioner Ward, you're right. It's going to take you a while to get through this. I know that on March 19th, when the scheduled working session is to take place, we will spend as much time as necessary to get through all of the content and all of your questions. So the beginning of this, there's 11 chapters in this report. 10 of the 11, again, are content, and the 11th is the appendices. The first chapter is the executive summary. It's very brief. It does focus a little bit on the 4 options that we were kind of focusing on since September. Up until September, we had looked at the justice system in a much more global and maybe far-reaching terms and effects until the sunsetting rule came in from the Department of Corrections and said, folks, your jail's going to close. So it caused us to really focus on what are some of the facility needs as opposed to some of the other elements that we had been working on up to that date were really program and policy and operational focus. We do address a lot of those in other chapters, but we know right now the pressure that everybody's feeling is what is going to happen to the facility. So we did refocus in September and spent a lot of time looking at those 4 options that are presented in one of the later chapters. Chapter 2 is just an introduction and a background on the project. Justin kind of summarized it in his statement tonight. So it's very brief. It will give the readers, and again, we attempted to write this with the idea that it may go a lot farther than just the county board commissioners. Anybody from the public is certainly entitled to see this, and so we wanted to make it informative. We tried to make it simple, well organized, so that it would flow and that it would help bring some logic and reason to some of the recommendations that the committee was providing, and again, give information to all of you as the decision makers in this process. Section 3 is a background on a jail, and again, Justin summarized a lot of the details. For those of you who don't know, and it's stated in the report clearly that the jail is basically, even though it was built in about 1970, it was bound by codes and laws that were created about 70 years prior to that. So the current operating protocols, the procedures, the standards for this jail were put in place around 1910, 1911, and those are the standards that this current jail still functions under. So obviously, you got 100-year-old standards in a jail, and that probably explains why there's a number of concerns about how that jail operates. It's very outdated, and it was all driven by the fact that in around 1970 there were going to be some changes in the standards, and the county rushed to get the jail built prior to those new standards taking effect because it had cost implications. Section number 4 is a really important chapter. It talks about how the jail has been used, and there's various levels of years that we reviewed. And again, Sergeant Glithero from the jail, he and a number of his staff spent lots and lots and lots of time pulling the data that we needed. And it was required because we had to figure out how the jail had been used in the past, what the trends were. We looked at bookings, that's how many are coming in, length of stay, average daily population, peak populations. We looked at classification levels. We also looked at gender issues. One of the observations that you're going to find in this report, and stated in a couple of different places, is that for whatever reason, Winona County has been, had their female population has been probably underrepresented in the overall jail population. That's something we typically refer to as suppressed usage, and basically it amounts to the fact that if you have no place to put them, sometimes you don't lock them up, or sometimes you let them out a lot earlier than maybe what they would otherwise if you had adequate space and resources for them. So the female population in Winona County, on average in the past, was a smaller percentage nationwide. Females make up now somewhere typically between 20 to 25% of the entire population, and that was something that we had to factor in quite heavily when we started looking at forecasting. And forecasting, which is in the next chapter, if I can get that to move. No, it doesn't want to move. But chapter 5 is all about how is a jail, what's going to be needed for the jail to function effectively in the future in terms of bed space, square footages, programs. This is where Bruce started to come in really as a great resource for us to look at equating square footages to the estimated number of beds that were needed. It's not just important to know what kinds or how many beds you need, but it's important to know what they are by classification and types. One thing that I want to emphasize is when we start talking about how many jail beds are needed, there are two ways to determine those beds. One is what are the needs on an everyday classification level. That's where an inmate comes in. They're going to be staying in custody for longer than book and release. They get assigned a housing unit based upon minimum, medium, or maximum, and then male and female. So those are your primary housing classification units, but those aren't the only beds that you need in a jail. You need booking and receiving cells. You need cells for suicide prevention, for detox, for medical, for mental health, administrative seg, protective custody. Those are all very short-term beds that are not intended to be a full-time classified assigned housing spot. So when an inmate goes into one of those special beds, they usually stay there only until it's determined that it's appropriate to return them back to general housing. So those specialized beds don't count, if you will, towards your overall bed demands, but they are needed nonetheless for your operational demands of the jail. So when we say that there's 100 bed needed, we also have to add in these specialized beds, and so I want to make sure that everybody's clear that option number 4 and what our projections and forecasting tell us is that very close to 100 classified beds are needed in Winona, and about 30 specialized beds are needed. And this is about a typical number of beds for specialized beds per that number. Happens that as we look at 100 beds, it's easy to figure out percentages based on the 100. Not that that's the way we did it. It just happened that Winona, in looking towards the future, it appears there's about 100 full-time classified beds needed for 10 years down the road. And again, the report will explain why we think that's going to happen, and it'll talk about justification of those numbers. Section number 6 is on managing the justice system, and that primarily gives a brief description of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. It's been in effect for over 10 years now. And again, these projections and forecasts that we're providing for in the earlier sections are all based on the assumption that those programs are all going to continue as is or expand. And that's very important when you start looking at, in a lot of jurisdictions, they're torn with the dilemma. Do we need programs or do we need jails? The answer is you need both. There's a continuum of care. The jail is just one resource along that continuum. So if you were to reduce programming in any particular area, it's likely to result in an elevation in the demand on jail beds. And if that were to happen, you would need more than 100 beds. So the importance of this comment that I'm making is that our forecasting is based on the assumption that all of these things are going to continue and hopefully expand target populations and have a bigger or greater impact on jail populations in the future. Section 7 talks about offender risk and needs. Those are the reasons that individuals come to jail are often called criminogenic factors. They're based on risk and needs, evidence-based practice, which has been around now for lots of years as well, but it's also called best practices. These are the intervention strategies that are typically put in place or the response mechanisms for criminal behavior. So evidence-based practices respond to a specific type of an offender, be it mentally ill, homeless, unemployed, chronically chemically dependent, mentally ill, all of these different types of populations that come into contact with the justice system. Many of them now have well-developed, scientifically based intervention strategies that can help impact some of their behavior and then hopefully impact the return rate to jail, in effect decreasing their return rate, the recidivism rate as it's known. So this particular chapter starts identifying some of these. It also cites some of the academic literature that supports evidence-based practices and using offender risk and needs in trying to develop these response mechanisms. So it gives a little bit of an educational background. Also talks about some of the services and programs available in Winona County. Section 8 is a physical assessment of the jail. Now, we did this very early on when our group came together. And this was well before the sunsetting order from the Department of Corrections was issued. So we gathered with an idea that we wanted to go into the existing jail, find out what are some of the physical structures that are very critical to assess in looking at risks associated to life safety and health. When you start looking at managing a facility that houses people that are committed there, your highest areas of risk and liability as a host to those kinds of individuals are based on life safety and health issues. So we went into the jail and we examined those areas that were high risk in those particular areas. We documented those all, and you are going to see those in Section 8 of that report. Now, it was created at that time with the idea that we want to lay out all of this information so that if this jail is going to be modified in some way to make it salvageable and continued to be maybe adaptively reused, we wanted to make sure that we indicated as many things that were deficient in that physical environment that would need to be addressed if it was going to continue to function as a jail, that building. So those are all outlined in Section 8. Section 9 now is a very critical and important section. This is where those 4 options are really discussed individually. They're broken down. They're compared against each other in a lot of different ways. There is a number of charts and tables that look at the economics of the four options. There's a number of different sections in that report that address the pros and cons of each of those options, and it allows you to kind of look at those and draw your own conclusions as to what you feel might be the best option to pursue. Interesting enough, now in most cases we were looking at a 10-year projection of beds. In this particular section, we started to have to use a 20-year context of comparison, because what we assumed was if option 3 or 4 or even option 2, which was a 72-hour holding facility, would be the selected option, there was going to be a fairly significant capital investment that would require perhaps a 20-year payback. So we started to compare those options against each other in 20-year time frames, where our earlier forecasting and our projections on populations and things were done for 10 years. So you'll notice that difference, but the entire reason was based on the payback schedule for the capital investment. That's why we compared those 20 years out. Section number 10 is the conclusions and recommendations from the Jail Advisory Committee. We attempted to fashion those in such a way that you would understand what the committee felt, after studying this for about 14 months, felt was the best course of action and the next steps for you to take. So those are outlined in that section. There are other ones that I think can probably add into that. Again, we were really focusing heavily on those four options because we understand that this is part of the urgency to act is driven by the closure of this current jail. Interesting enough as well, within that chapter, we talk about the recommendation, which has already been suggested. The Jail Advisory Committee, through consensus, felt that option number 4, the 365-day Class 3 facility, was the most appropriate option to consider. However, there are these other possible concepts within that concept that should be explored before a final design is approved. So the Jail Advisory Committee feels that although option 4 was the most appropriate course of action, there are a number of considerations that should be investigated further before any final decisions are made on that concept. So those are all outlined in Section 10. And Section 11 has some real important information as well. That is the appendix. And in that there are a number of legal opinions. We struggled with trying to figure out, for instance, what the transportation costs and issues and the staffing patterns and the ratios for doing nothing, which is really transferring all of the inmates out of Winona County and housing them elsewhere. We were trying to figure out what the best practice is on that. We made numerous contacts to numerous people outside of this county to try to figure out what might be the best, safest practice for transporting inmates. We contacted National Institute of Corrections, Bureau of Justice Assistance. They recommended contacting the Marshals Service, the National Sheriff's Association, the Minnesota Sheriff's Association, and we contacted legal counsel for a number of those different organizations, all trying to get opinions on how inmates, if there was going to be a full transfer and transport, a constant transport of inmates, how is that going to best be done in the safest manner for staff, inmates, and the public. A number of those appendices are directly connected to the information that we are using in building this report. So you will see some of the legal opinions and some of the other comments from different people included in that appendix. So with that kind of describes the way the report is organized. We certainly understand it is a lot of material. You all have a lot of other things on your plate as well. As you go through this report, we encourage you to jot down your questions. Again, some of your questions might be answered in a later section of the report. And when we come back together on March 19th, We'll be prepared to, I think, respond to any of the questions you have. We're pretty, I think, knowledgeable about many of the elements of this that may not be documented in this report. We may have information that's not included. I know when you look at a couple 100-page document, you think you got to have everything covered, but I am really impressed with the effort, the contributions of the Jail Advisory Committee. This was kind of my first experience in working with an advisory group that basically was the worker bees in this. And when we came into this, I wasn't sure exactly how that was going to work. It worked because we had people like Ken and Karen and Justin chairing those work groups and making sure that the work got done. And with that, I can also tell you that a project of this nature is otherwise a fairly substantial investment, and you were able to avoid a lot of that cost. Now, obviously, you paid for me to help facilitate it, but really that is a very small portion of what a project of this nature typically costs as you start to examine it. So you did it in a very cost-effective manner. You saved a lot of money by doing it. 14 months is for the amount of work that this group did, and the fact that everybody had other jobs they were doing as well is a real accomplishment, and they should be commended for it. And I actually had an easy job just facilitating the process. So I want to acknowledge all of their effort, and again, look forward to coming together on March 19th so we can go through this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's it. The PowerPoint, we're not going through the PowerPoint?
We went through what we had.
Okay, very good. I think when just a simple summary of that report is so intensive and complete, it gives you at least a little bit of an idea how intensive and complete the report is. So I really appreciate all the work of all the people I see. Also, I see several partners who came in with people because probably you didn't get to see your husband or your wife unless you came along to meetings. So it's also a family contribution. And many of the people that served on the committee, most of the people had other regular jobs. So we really appreciate your time and effort that went into this report. I'll see you on March the 11th. Do we need a motion? March the 19th, excuse me. Do we need a motion to accept the presentation or just?
I'd like that. I think
Okay.
it's good in the record.
Okay, so I need a motion to accept the presentation. Okay. We have a motion by Commissioner Jacob, seconded by Commissioner Olson, to accept the presentation of the jail needs report. All those in favor, is there any discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Oppose? Okay, the jail presentation report is accepted. Thank you all again very much for your hard work.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Ward.
A question, it was included in our packet. Is it available as a separate unit on our website? So the public can just click and say jail study versus having to search and.
Yeah, I actually just made a note to make sure it goes out there, but yeah.
Yeah,
it will be.
so it's a
Same
separate-
place where the jail advisory committee is.
Well,
on the
does it,
website.
again, I've always had issues with our website. It's not the most user-friendly. Is it,
We'll
can
put
it be
it-
a separate?
We'll put it up front.
Yeah,
so you
so they
see
can
it.
just click on it
Yeah,
instead of
yeah.
hunt and search.
Yeah.
Our website is not Google friendly, and the world, and as you all know, we have become Google. You Google everything, but our website doesn't recognize those things. So we want it easy for people to find. Thank you.
Okay, we have committee reports and communications. Commissioner Ward.
Two things for future board action. One that needs to be done very quickly is a discussion for family night on the farm. We need to do some expediting to help that group accomplish their task of doing that event.
I would second putting that on the future agenda.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Very good.
And the other one is a week and a half ago at the township officer meeting, planning department had clarified some of the zoning ordinance. When a application is in an exact township, they get a sign off and they get acknowledged of what the conditional use permit or variance is. But we still have not adequately addressed the neighboring. If the project is on the border of another township, we have not, to the township officers functioning, they want that included as the applicant has to go to that border if it's a border situation. And Kay Qualley was there, and she'll be working on that, but we need to follow up and put that on a future board agenda.
I will second that. I agree with that.
Okay, thank you. Very good.
And then just the last thing, Mr. Klinger also said it, a big thank you to anybody that touched snow and helped the people on the on the road that were stranded. I think we showed great hospitality and safety and general welfare. And I have to shout out to my townships. They did an awesome job too. Township roads are a little challenging. We live in the hills and the valleys, and they did, to my knowledge, a very exceptional job moving it. Now let's just hope they got the message that the snow stays where it is, it doesn't move around again, and we'll all be okay. But if Mr. Klinger follows up and we put out thank yous, I think that would be great. So thank you to everybody that can help.
Commissioner Meyer.
Commissioner Ward covered my request, which was the same thing to do with the township, so I don't have anything.
Okay. I have a couple announcements. Again, thanks to the plow crews and to all the people who were out endless hours. Our plow crews actually slept overnight in the facilities, as I'm sure some of the emergency people did too. And 7 of our plows were stuck at different times, which is kind of amazing. But so there was 24-hour work being done, and I just appreciate that. There is a meeting which in some ways follows up the jail presentation. There's a meeting on gaps in housing in the community on this Saturday, March the 2nd, from 9 to 12 at St. Mary's Church. And they're going to talk about transitional housing needs in the community and then gaps in those housing areas. So that's one of the issues mentioned in our jail report. I attended the SHAC meeting, the State Community Health Advisory Committee. I attended by phone due to the weather. A couple things came out in the discussion. Commissioner Malcolm was there, the Commissioner for Community Services, and she mentioned 2 things specifically that are on the front burner at least. One was the Tobacco 21 legislation, and she talked a bit about what that would mean and how it would work. Just to follow that up, I wanted the community to be aware that the Alliance for Substance Abuse Prevention, has put together a backpack, like a high school student's backpack, with items in there that the students are using to vape with, to do the electronic cigarettes. And then they're doing public education to take this around and use as discussion points. Parents, anybody, you'd be amazed at how much those items look like real items. And so, if you just happen to be looking in your child's backpack and you see a marker or USB drive, thank you. It could also be a Juul, which is a vaping product, and just all kinds of things. So, and they talked about it from a public health risk of why it's approaching a crisis and what we can do about it. The other thing she talked about that I think, again, was typified tonight was she talked about community projects and a multidisciplinary approach to solving community problems. She talked about it in relationship to addiction and opioids, but it actually fits for a lot of our community awareness or community issues. organizing nonprofits, government programs, medical resources, justice resources, and putting all of these together to work in a community to solve a problem. I think we work through a lot of our problems in that way, and I like to see that. So it's interesting. She was right on that side of things. The Minnesota Results First, I've talked about that in the past. This is a program that operates out of the management and budget section of our state government, out of the Department of Administration. Has nothing to do with programs or people in that area, but it takes a cost analysis look at programs in different areas. And this topic is children's mental health. So for all the children's mental health options, they've discussed them and gone through. They rated them as promising or proven effective, evidence-based, all kinds of information in here. So you can take this document and find programs to use that really are evidence-based and scientifically backed and things like that. So there's just really good discussion. They've done other areas. They've done adult mental health services, but now they've done children's mental health. So that's my announcements for tonight. Commissioner Jacob.
Thank you. A couple of items. First of all, I'd like to put on a future meeting agenda to discuss our policy regarding Board of Adjustment and planning, how staff and legal makes conclusions and recommendations. Where we've been on the daily application certainly deviates from our past policy and practices. So I'd like to just discuss where this board is and where they want to go and how that compares to where we've been. So if I could get a second on that, I'd like to.
I will second that for.
Okay. Also, given the daily application, I'd like to have the board look at revisiting the animal unit cap.
I'll second that for a future agenda.
Okay. And then just wanted to say thank you to, first of all, to everyone here tonight, all the work that's been done on the from the Jail Advisory Committee. Really important information for us to work through here. I've got a lot to go on. That's good work, and appreciate that. Appreciate our road crews. In my Facebook feed, I've gotten countless comments on how Winona County has exceeded neighboring counties and the state of Minnesota. And I'm looking at the road right below my house, Highway 74. At 3 o'clock today, still hadn't even been plowed, and of course, county roads they've been plowed how many times since then? So, incredible work by not just public, not just county crews, but private crews. So many thanks to everyone in the community for working together on such a difficult time. Emergency Operations Center, thanks so much for all your contributions during this hard times. Thanks to our shelters. Thanks for volunteers in the community. We're blessed to live in a county that really watches out. And so those are my comments. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Okay, need a motion to adjourn. Okay, second. Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Olson, second by Commissioner Jacob to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Meeting is adjourned.